a common position.
The Ukraine war will be the main topic at the opening of the 61st Munich Security Conference, held in a city synonymous with Europe's appeasement of Hitler at a conference in 1938 in the run-up to World War II. History some critics are raising to describe President Trump's dealings with Russian President Putin over Ukraine.
We begin tonight with MTS Tayeb, who's been covering the Ukraine war from the start. Armata!
For Ukraine, this has always been a war of survival. Nearly 3 years after Russia's full-scale invasion, there have been hundreds of thousands of casualties, and Russian forces occupy around 20% of the country's territory. It's a war we have covered from the very beginning.
We just had some incoming Russian shelling.
In May 2022, we came under heavy Russian fire in the Kherson region. With so much still at stake, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is now in a diplomatic battle over who will negotiate the conflict's end. I articulate this very clearly to our partners, he said. Any bilateral talks about Ukraine that is without us, we will not accept. His comments followed U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's pointed remarks at the NATO headquarters in Brussels about Kyiv potentially having to make major concessions to Moscow, where Hegseth was asked if the U.S. was abandoning Ukraine.
There is no betrayal there. There is a recognition that the whole world and the United States is invested and interested in peace, a negotiated peace. As President Trump has said, stopping the killing.
Ukrainian and European leaders were also worried President Trump's decision to host a summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin has also left them out of any potential peace talks. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius warned,
The Trump
administration has already made public concessions to Putin before negotiations have even begun. In Moscow, the mood was decidedly different. Evening news shows were almost gleeful as they praised Presidents Trump and Putin for having agreed to hold the talks. All this while in Ukraine, the war raged on. Earlier today, the eastern city of Kramatorsk was targeted by Russian fighter jets. At least one person was killed and 5 injured, according to first responders.
And MTS Tayeb joins us now. MTS, the Secretary of Defense says this is not a betrayal of the Ukrainians. How are the Ukrainians seeing it?
Well, betrayal is a very strong word, but that really does seem to be what Ukrainians are feeling tonight. You know, we were actually on the ground in Kyiv when President Trump won re-election back in November, and the people we spoke to then said that they believed him when he said that he would end the war, but they also believed that it would be Russia that would be ordered to make concessions and not Ukraine. And so the fear now is that at best the front lines will be frozen, which means the fighting will stop and Russia will keep the territory it's already taken, but at worst that this is simply a chance for Putin to take a pause, reload, and then restart his war on Ukraine.
MTS, you've reported from Ukraine many times before the war and during the war. What are your observations on how the Ukrainians have been evolving throughout all of this?
Look, it's an understatement to say that Ukraine is a country forever changed. So many of their best and brightest have been killed in the fighting. And as you saw in our report, we ourselves have come very close to those front lines, which has seen entire cities razed to the ground. And Ukrainians tell us that they know they can rebuild. They know they can heal from the physical wounds. But the enormous toll Vladimir Putin's war has had on them and their families, well, those internal wounds will be much, much harder to recover from.
MTS Tayeb in London.
Robert Costa has been checking with his White House sources.
And Bob, Ukraine, as MTS just said, feels like it's being cut out of this deal. How does the president see this deal with Russia over the Ukrainian war?
John Maurice, good to be with you. When we would talk to Biden administration officials, they would always say when it comes to Ukraine, they're abiding by what they would frame as post-World War II international order, a set of norms when it comes to dealing with American foreign policy. But when I talk to the Trump White House, they say those norms, that sense of order when it comes to foreign policy making, out the window. It's not the art of the deal, it's the pursuit of the deal. And at this point, those close to President Trump say any deal that's going to be cut is likely going to come down to President President Trump and President Putin, not necessarily what President Zelensky wants.
Okay, Bob, we want to turn to another topic here right now. The case of New York City's Mayor Eric Adams. 3 federal prosecutors, including the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, have now resigned in protest after the Justice Department ordered them to drop criminal charges against the mayor. Adams had been indicted for bribery, fraud, and soliciting contributions from foreign nationals. And the former head prosecutor in Manhattan, Bob, alleges the mayor's team was pushing for what amounted to a quid pro quo here.